It's time for Security Now. Steve has questions and answers, 10 of them. He'll also talk about the latest security news. Stand by. Security Now is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by the new Winamp for Android, featuring wireless sync and one-click iTunes import. Now with free daily music downloads and full-length CD listening parties. Download it for free at winamp.com/Android. Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. It's time for Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 419, recorded August 28th, 2013. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 174. Security Now is brought to you by ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it should be, anonymously and without oversight. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the offer code SN20. And by Lookout, a mobile security company trusted by over 40 million customers, including me. Lookout specializes in stopping new cyber threats, finding lost or stolen phones, and backing up data. Protect your Android or iOS device now by visiting lookout.com/securitynow for the free download. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you, your loved ones, your privacy, online and off. And I say off because we do some of that too. He's Mr. Steve Gibson, our explainer-in-chief here from grc.com, the man who created Shields Up, SpinRite, the world's best hard drive maintenance utility, and of course, this first discovered spyware, coined the term, and wrote the first, believe it or not, anti-spyware program, these many years ago.
Yes, I used to have hair back then, Leo.
And here we are in the year 9 of the Security Now show cover. That's a long time for a show to be going. That's great.
Now, the reason it continues, though, is that we don't take ourselves too seriously, which I'm going to prove with the first item here on our list to discuss.
This is a Q&A episode. So
it is.
We'll get a little news in, but
we first need to discuss dewaxing ears.
All yours, sir. I actually have some stories to tell along those lines, but go ahead.
Well, that's why we're discussing it, because I heard you on Twit talking about how you are, this was on Sunday, you had been declined for having your custom earpieces.
My ear molds. The audiologist said, you got to clean your ears first.
Now,
and she said, I don't do earwax removal. You got to go to the hospital, the doctors to do that.
Well, not true. That's why I wanted to put this at the top of the show, Leo.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I have the solution for your earwax removal needs.
No matter what it is, Steve will. This is what I like about geeks, particularly people like Steve. They'll do the research. They'll find the best. Doesn't matter. Can be a projection TV. It can be earwax removal.
And you can bring this up on the screen, earclear.com, www.earclear.com.
You know, the Gizwiz had some Fakatka ear vacuum that he tested out.
Yeah, those are ridiculous. Yeah. So this was after I had kicked into my let's take ourselves seriously about health and supplements and all that stuff that I've been doing now for 8 years.
Yeah.
And always, my entire life, my right ear tended to collect wax.
Yeah. It's a genetic thing. It's actually a marker. 23andMe discusses this. There are 2 markers for earwax. There's wet and flaky, wet and dry. And you and I probably have the wet marker.
I think that's probably true. What I will tell you is the idea of using a syringe, it absolutely works. It is doctor approved. That's what the doctor does.
Now, on this page, it looks like you're shooting Coca-Cola into your ear. That's probably not the case,
No, he
right?
put the Coke can. He's an interesting guy. He actually called me on the phone when I ordered some of these. So I think it's a rather small operation. I don't think and I don't remember whether there was a PayPal button at the time. His is very expensive. His is like $40. But there's one for $6.49. That first link in the show notes, healthenterprises.com, earwax removal syringe. Anyway, the point is,
can't you just get a bulb or something to do that? I mean,
you want enough volume, but so let me just get this out, Leo.
All right, get it out.
You do this in the shower. You have your
Yes.
syringe
'Cause
there.
it can be messy.
In the shower.
Yes.
And so you pull the plunger out, fill the little tube up,
Yeah.
put it in the top, and just squirt a syringe worth of warm shower water into each ear. I have turned several friends onto this in addition to myself, and they cannot believe it. I mean, they were doing Q-tips and coat hangers and,
Oh,
you know.
don't do coat hangers. Holy moly.
No,
That would be a bad idea.
It was bad. And so this is, I mean, this is the way you solve the problem. And so if you do this, just, you know, when you do your daily shower, you just squirt one syringe worth into each ear. In a couple days, they are just, it's amazing how effective it is. And I wouldn't be sharing this if it didn't absolutely work.
Thank you.
And just solve the problem once and for all.
Because of you, I'm going to get my in-ear molds made.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. They also, by the way, the same company makes vinyl eye patches and pill splitters. So it's a good company. They're in the biz.
Earclear.com, folks?
Yeah, AccuLife. Yeah. No. The AccuLife Health Enterprise. The second,
okay.
the $6.49 one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I went for the $35 or $40.
You went for the expensive one, huh?
Yeah, well, it's actually the first one that I saw. I don't know how, because Amazon has like 1 million of them.
Yes.
You put in like ear syringe.
Yes.
You just get a bazillion of them.
Yes.
Somehow I found this guy.
The $40 one.
Yeah, he took himself very seriously too on the phone. He was like, you know, it comes with. Well, in fact, here's mine. I had it. I had.
Holy cow! That thing's got a lot of volume.
Yeah. You just. Yeah. Nice little pop, and so you just fill it up and then squirt it into your ear. And he talks about how it's got this little bent angle so that you can't go too deep. And
that's good. You don't want to do that. Yeah.
You know, and he's got his little set of instructions that comes with. And anyway, all I'm saying is that's the solution, and it works perfectly. It just ends the issue for anyone who has an issue with earwax. Okay. Actually, we're going to do some security, Leo.
Good.
Yeah. On the subject, the category of that didn't take long.
Yeah.
We have a huge lineup of like everybody being shaken out of the rafters who have secure communication solutions to the NSA dilemma.
Oh God. You know, I got some emails from people talking about NIMS and all sorts of things.
Yeah. And so the phase we're in at the moment is the everybody rushing to capitalize and cash in on the current frenzy over security. That'll pass, and we'll end up with the right solution, or, you know, a couple of them.
Right.
At the moment, everybody's jumping in. So, of course, Kim.com
of the mega fame, yeah.
Of mega fame, he's in New Zealand, right?
Yes.
And he's not happy with the New Zealand government because they're beginning to make some noises about changing regulations to, you know, thwart his ambitions.
Yeah.
Anyway, so his deal is he's going to fill the shoes of LavaBit.
Of course he is. Being the humanitarian that he is.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So Vikram Kumar, who is with Mega, told ZDNet that the company was being asked to deliver secure email and voice services. We don't know who's asking, but somebody apparently. He says,
please, Mega.
You have to solve this problem.
It's up to you.
In the wake of the closures, he expanded on his plans. Kumar said, work is in progress, building off the end-to-end encryption and contacts functionality already working for documents in Mega. Quoting him, the biggest tech hurdle is providing email functionality that people expect, such as searching emails that are trivial to provide if emails are stored in plain text or available in plain text on the server side, says Kumar. Continuing to quote him, if all the server can see is encrypted text, as is the case with true end-to-end encryption, then all the functionality has to be built client-side. That's not quite impossible, but very, very hard. That's why even Silent Circle didn't go there. A big issue is handling emails to and from non-encrypted contacts when Mega's core proposition is end-to-end encryption, says Kumar. Of course, yes, that's what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. So he says, on this and other fronts, Mega is doing some hugely cutting-edge stuff. He says, there is probably no one in the world, Leo, who takes the Mega approach.
No one.
No.
And that's because they're all so stupid.
Of making true crypto work for the masses.
True.
Which is, says Kumar, our core proposition.
It's what we do.
So we don't know yet what he's up to.
Right.
He talked about Bloom filters, which is an interesting filtering technology. Maybe it's going to provide searching of encrypted email. I'm not sure why that's a big need, but we'll see. So they're weighing in. Also, Moxie Marlinspike. It's apparently come in off of his boat, and
it brings him out from all the corners, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's like, oh, wait, we can solve this. So Dan Gooden, our friend over at Ars Technica, reported, and so we know about Red Phone. Red Phone was the secure solution that Moxie was doing with thoughtcrimes.com. Remember, ThoughtCrimes is Moxie's site where he's working on this. So now they've got something called Text Secure for Android and iOS. And again, details are still unclear, and I'm a little uncomfortable by the way they're trying to solve the problem. The problem with texting security is that the protocols like OTP that we've talked about are that they're online protocols like SSL. If you think about it, the whole idea of a handshake in SSL is real-time exchange of cryptographic content in order to do key agreement and obtain a secret which you share, which you then use to encrypt your interchange. The problem with text messaging is it's not necessarily real time. That is, by design, it's like email. It can be a store and forward sort of operation. So the question is, how do you secure this? And so I think what we're going to be seeing for the future and what we'll be covering are various attempts and approaches and ideas. I'm interested to see where this goes. I think long term, once we get out of this this reactionary, oh my God, we're the ones who have the solution, we'll probably come up with something that works because I really do believe that a consequence of all of this will be the development by the big boys, by the heavy guns, by the RFC committee kind of guys of some next generation solutions. There will be pressure to create them that we really haven't seen before. So the reason I'm a little uncomfortable with what Moxie's doing, aside from the fact we don't really have an understanding of it, is there's something called pre-keys, which they store on the server. And that immediately makes me feel nervous. Apparently, when you create an account for this Text Secure, at least for iOS, and there's some confusion between iOS and Android, because if your Android machine is on, Android is better than iOS is about allowing things to run in the background. And so there can actually be a handshake in the background with Android that iOS just will not support. iOS is going to fight you on this. So again, details are very fuzzy, but what I've seen is comments like 100 keys are pre-generated and stored on the server. So your phone I'm making this up now. I'm just, like, okay, well, how would this work? Apparently, 100 keys get generated. And the idea is that that's a way for you to receive 100 text messages in a what I could only regard as semi-secure fashion, because they have the keys. But I mean, maybe they're encrypted so that we just don't know. They could be encrypted so that something it's just impossible to guess how this thing can be secure, where your phone is pre-generating your phone or the server is pre-generating keys, and then somehow that decouples you from needing to be online in real time. But Moxie's in the game, and with Thought Crimes, and we'll maybe get more details as this thing matures.
Now, I'm interested in the idea of remailers. At some point, I'd like you to look at that. The cypherpunks, who I really trust in all of this, do some remailing, which looks like the only real way to be completely anonymous and private. Because when you send mail, it has to be. I mean, you got to use PGP, right? Anyway, we've talked about this before. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't understand how somebody can provide a service unless it's software on your desktop.
I completely agree. End-to-end encryption. We have a great question. We have a great question that we're going to get to later in the show about the notion of maybe, well, why not let the email server do that rather than the client? And it's an interesting sort of thought experiment in moving that one step back toward the server, which we'll talk about. I want to cover a couple more of these things. There's something called Wickr. Again, another one of these. Oh, we got a solution for that. WICKR. Not clear where the name came from. MyWickr, MYWICKR.com is the company. And these guys, okay, they sort of sound like they're using a lot of the right words. It's free, and it's like, okay, well, it would be nice to understand why you're doing this and how we trust you. So it's a free app. They show it, I think, for an iPhone. I'm not sure how much platform cross-compatibility there is, but they're on their site. The internet is forever. Your private communications. The internet is forever. Your private communications don't need to be. And so deleting stuff is one of their benefits. So they say that Wickr is a free app that provides military-grade encryption. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I have to say that for, mom and dad. Of text, picture, audio, and video messages, sender-based control over who can read messages, where and for how long, best available privacy, anonymity, and secure file shredding features, security that is simple to use. So, okay, that all sounds good. Then they said, we have made this app with the best available security technology, but we strongly encourage you to only send private messages to people you trust. What? Oh, okay.
Whatever.
So,
I don't know why they even say that.
I guess bizarre. Anthony Weiner could use this, but he needs to trust the recipient, which actually does make sense.
Sounds like more snake oil to me.
Yes, exactly. Then they said, Wickr uses AES 256 to protect data and ECDH 521. So we know that that's elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman key exchange.
Why that's military grade.
Well, I know, Leo.
Yeah.
Whoa. Maybe they have Navy SEALs. They haven't said that, but maybe. For the key exchange, RSA 4096 is also used as a backup and for legacy app versions. So I guess they used to use that, but they don't anymore. They went to elliptic curve, which is shorter keys, and it's going to be faster and so forth. Wickr also uses SHA 256 for hashing, which is the only thing you can use it for, and transport layer security. Encryption keys are used only once, then destroyed by the sender's phone. Okay, that sounds good. Each message is encrypted with its own unique key, and no two users can have the same AES 256 or ECDH 521 keys ever. Our servers do not have the decryption keys. Only the intended recipients of the intended devices can decrypt the messages. So that all sounds good. And blah, blah, blah. I wrote more here when I was making the show notes.
Blah, blah, blah is good. That's a good summation, a summary of all of it.
Yeah. So, and,
yada, yada, yada.
The information you give us, your information is always disguised with multiple rounds of salted cryptographic hashing before, then it parens, if it is transmitted to our servers. Okay, I don't know what that means. Because of this, we
well, if you never mail it, they can't.
Yeah,
never
keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. That's really trustworthy then. That's the most.
If you don't trust anyone, Leo, just don't send it out.
No, don't send it.
Anyway, I don't know. Another one of these things. Then we have Cackle. Secure, safe, private, and confidential. I don't know where it's Cackle, Cackle, CACKLE-IT.com. And then this is a little disturbing under the how we do it category. I'm quoting them, explaining exactly which ciphers we use at which times and for what reason.
We shouldn't tell you that.
Would be tantamount, Leo.
Tantamount.
To giving, good word, tantamount, to giving away our company secrets.
No.
Wouldn't want that to happen. No. However.
Look, they put a key on an iPhone. Yeah. Wow.
what we can divulge is an incomplete list of some of the cryptographic methods we make use of. 16,384 bits of ID-based encryption. Whew. Leo, that's a lot of bits.
That's a lot of bits.
384-bit elliptic curve encryption, 256-bit and higher AES encryption, the Diffie-Hellman protocol for the handshake. But that's all we'll say.
No more.
No, we don't want to give away any of our company secrets.
They're in Cyprus, by the way. Cackle is.
I did see that. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of open source. So obscurity.
I know.
Security through obscurity.
And then and then I gave money to Hemless. We talked about Hemless.
Yeah.
Some time ago.
How'd that work out for you?
Not very well. HEML.is. Unfortunately, apparently everyone has been asking them how their crypto works. They're spending time on the pretty colors on their UI. There's been a lot of focus. In fact, on their second update blog posting, they have a spectrum of colors, and they show which letters of the alphabet each color corresponds to, because that will help you see which conversation, to follow the threading of conversations. And this is, Leo, it's very pretty. But unfortunately, in the third update, under the topic, the questions about encryption, they wrote, this is most questions about Hemless is about the encryption we're going to.
Most questions is about the.
Yes. How it's going to work and details about it. For different reasons. Now, to be fair, English is not their first language, so their English is much better than my Swedish.
Right.
But they said, for different reasons, we've stayed away from talking too much about the details. It's not because we're arrogant. It's just that dealing with the crypto, I'm quoting them from their third update, but dealing with the crypto community, it's really time consuming. They don't have time.
Oh, we've seen that happen before.
And they said, whatever solution we've decided on would be criticized. And
wouldn't want that.
We aren't interested in the flame war that's inevitable.
Right.
We'd rather create and get things going. Maybe a small lesson for the crypto geeks out there would be to be supportive instead of negative. And it's like, well,
Steve, you're not being very supportive.
I thought these were security guys, Leo.
That's
why I gave them.
It's very obvious they're web designers.
Why I gave them money. Yeah.
They're not security guys.
They did say, after taking all things into careful consideration, we've decided exactly how the encryption will work, which is nice. I guess they're not going to tell anybody because they're afraid they'll upset us, which It's not really the right strategy. However, they said, we've listened to all the comments and wishes from you guys, and we are now quite happy with the implementation we're going for.
Well, thank goodness. I'm glad they're happy.
It's based on free and open source solutions, and we'll release the full source we create for the usage of it.
Oh, good. All
so
right.
that's good.
Yeah.
More details will follow later, closer to release. So that's hopeful. We'll see what they come up with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of where we are right now. As I predicted last week, I mean, this is essentially what's happened. Is everyone's gone, oh my God, look, everybody suddenly wants security. We, didn't you say that your mother was a security expert? Well, let's ask her. Okay. So
she stores all her passports on the desktop in a file called passports.doc. That's secure.
Yeah. So that's where we are. We'll keep track of this. I want to keep receiving people's findings. Send me a tweet or a note.
You don't use PGP, do you? You don't really use email, so you don't use anything.
No, I've just never had a need
Right.
for secure mail.
I got a couple of very interesting emails, encrypted emails from a guy who styles himself Demosthenes. You may remember.
Yes.
The character of Demosthenes from the Ender's Cycle. He gave me very specific instructions on how to use Cypherpunk's NYN as an anonymous,
as in a
pseudonym servers, which is an interesting, and it still uses PGP, but it's about it's about the metadata, hiding metadata as well. So an interesting idea. But I'll pass those along to you, and you can enjoy.
Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. So, the most tweeted to me topic of the week was unfortunately the source of great hyperbole for members of the press, whose headlines were "No passwords are safe any longer." The end of secure passwords as we have known it. Now, if you were using Monkey, Leo,
yes,
maybe that's true. All that happened, however, is that the well-known high-performance Hashcat GPU-based brute force cracking system,
yes, which has become very good.
They had a password length limit of 15 characters forever. It's always been 15 characters, and so all anybody had to do is to use a 16-character password, and Hashcat couldn't handle it. At the cost of rewriting half of their source code.
And slowing it down a little bit, too.
Yes, it was, yes. They lost 15% because the limiting the password length to 15 characters for all kinds of technical, just like the data path width requirements, there were optimizations they were able to apply at 15 characters or fewer, which is why in the beginning, when this was first written, that's what they did. That was their target. But they realized that couldn't stand. So Jens Stube, S-T-E-U-B-E, who also goes by the handle Atom, wrote in the release notes for this upgrade, "This was by far one of the most requested features. We resisted adding this feature as it would force us to remove several optimizations, resulting in a decrease in performance for most algorithms. The actual performance loss depends on several factors, GPU, attack mode, etc., but typically averages around 15%. Dan Gooden, who's a pretty good technical writer for Ars Technica, wrote, "As leaked lists of real-word passwords proliferate, many people have turned to passwords and passphrases dozens of characters long in hopes of staying ahead of the latest cracking techniques. Crackers have responded by expanding the dictionaries they maintain to include phrases and word combinations found in the Bible, in common literature, and in online discussions. For instance, independent password researcher Kevin Young recently decoded one particularly stubborn hash as the cryptographic representation of, quotes, "There is no fate but what we make," which, of course, we all know came from Terminator 2.
Oh, really? I didn't know that, but good. Good on you for recognizing that.
And so there is, there is no fate but what we make is obviously a concatenation of a bunch of words.
Yeah.
So those of us who have thought about this a lot recognize that, yes, that's good, but it doesn't have actually
password.
that much entropy.
Right.
Because,
well, and did you see how they found it? It was in there's a Wikipedia entry with the quote in it.
Well,
so actually, apparently they're hashing all the Wikipedia entries or something.
There may be that, but I think maybe you're thinking of this second one.
Oh, okay.
Yanis
yes.
Stenthal.
That was that. Yeah.
A security researcher who recently completed his Master's of Science thesis on modern password cracking was able to crack the password. This one is just ridiculous.
Get this.
I can't pronounce this.
No.
Capital P H and then an accent. NGLUI space MGLW quote single quote mark accent NAFH space capital C THULHU space capital R apostrophe LYEH space LGAH apostrophe NAGL space lowercase FHTAGN1 period.
Which looks like random, but it's not.
No, that's the fictional occult phrase from H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Call of Cthulhu.
Cthulhu, yeah.
Cthulhu.
Yeah. By the way, James Spawn said, oh, yeah, that's from The Call of Cthulhu. In our chat room. Right away, recognize it.
That's why we got good people in the chat room. It would have been impossible to use a brute force attack or even a combined dictionary to crack a phrase of that length. But because the phrase was contained in this Wikipedia article, it wound up in a word list that allowed the security researcher to crack the phrase in a matter of minutes. This podcast, our listeners' takeaway is abandon anything but true random characters. It's the only thing we have left. If
you used a random passphrase but actual words, wouldn't that be okay or no?
Well, there
not
is
as good, of course.
What we make that may have actually appeared because it appeared in Terminator 2. But
somebody in the chat room said, if my doorbell has cow mustard on top of its sticky sidewalls, it's not. That's such a random phrase. You could remember it. So that's the issue, right? Is the best obviously is truly random. The more entropy, the better.
Yeah, I really think we're in an era now where tools like LastPass, where they are long, truly random passwords, and you have given up. You are no longer remembering any of those. You've turned responsibility over to this technology. We're at that point now where you have one master password, which also really needs to be good. But I'm a fan of using a keyboard based algorithm and something to come up with something really screwy, and that's the way I remember my master password. Something sort of semi-mechanical, and then just give up and have a good random number generator or random password generator make things up for you. That's just the way I've been operating now ever since I found and vetted LastPass. It's just like, and the good news is that it's LastPass is ubiquitous. It's on all your platforms. I've got it running on my iPad, and so when I want to do something on my iPad, it's like, oh, I use LastPass Tab, which is the iOS-based browser, and it says, oh yeah, here, I'll fill that in for you. It's like, oh, thank goodness. So you need ubiquity if you're gonna have passwords in your life that you absolutely don't know any longer.
Yeah, the challenge is this this master pass, which you have to remember.
You got to have one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try. Chris, somebody from YubiKey sent me a note saying that they have a new YubiKey. One of their YubiKeys supports PGP passwords, passphrases.
Oh.
So I'm gonna try doing that. Of course, if you lose the YubiKey, you're screwed.
Yep. So don't
I still
do that.
think it's best to have something that's in your mind that you can remember.
Yeah, and the YubiKey, great as it is for its purpose, is USB.
Right.
And so
That's not going to work on Android. Right.
On your phone. Right.
You're going to have to do what Walt did and just memorize the GPS coordinates of his stash.
And then, did you see what he did? Then
Yes, I thought that was brilliant. Now, this is not a spoiler because it's not a plot point.
Very obscure.
But he needed to remember a GPS coordinate, so he memorized it. But of course,
short term.
Short term. He didn't trust his long term memory, so he bought a lotto ticket with a number of numbers. It wasn't the number that he used, but the second number in with the number of numbers that he purchased. He worked. So he must have
basically he turned it into a lotto ticket so that there was a record on the refrigerator that no one would ever imagine was GPS coordinates. Yep, very clever. Okay, now this is bizarre. It's sort of fun and interesting. People should not panic, but it turns out that Netscape Security Suite, NSS, which is the foundation for both Firefox and now Chrome, has an SSL logging feature. If you create an environment variable, all capitals, SSL key log file, and you set that environment variable to a file name, then you launch Firefox or Chrome and do anything with SSL, and then look at that file. It has dumped all of the security keys that were negotiated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, is that that's like the key? That's all you need. In fact,
it is so much the key that if you also, even somewhere else, captured the traffic, Wireshark will decrypt the dialogue for you using the hex which has been logged in that keylog file. So you can try it yourself. SSL keylog file as an environment variable. Set that to a file name. I just set it to C:\\, here are my keys .log, and fired up Chrome, went to GRC, looked in the file, and here was this beautiful log of all of the negotiation that had been done.
Now, it doesn't do that unless you've set that environment variable? It doesn't do it by default. Okay. So it's a debugging feature.
It's a debugging feature that developers use, and it is handy if you yourself are a developer and you don't have something like Fiddler or one of the ways of intercepting secure transactions, because Wireshark will you're able to decode this protocol, drop the hex in, and it's like blink, there's all of your dialogue in the clear. So you certainly, if you turn this on to play with it, remove it after you're done. I mean, so this is not a huge issue, because remember, we have to understand what our security perimeter is. Our own system is our own system. We want to keep malware out of it. We want to keep people out of it. This is like, Chrome that doesn't encrypt your website passwords, that sort of thing. It's like, in RAM are all these keys all the time. They have to be there to be used to have dialogues. Normally our browser doesn't write them to disk. And these are keys relative to the server you visited, but that's only going to be the server's, public key and the keys that you negotiated for a while. But you don't want to have that happening. So it's I ran across this this morning, this SSL keylog file as an environment variable that will cause the local security suite, the NSS, Netscape Security Suite, to log what it does to hard drive.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to mention, since all of your other podcasts had commented on Steve Ballmer's news that he was leaving, that he was one of my favorite people there, Leo.
Yeah.
I'd got to know Steve.
Really?
Back in the days when, he and Gates were hanging out at Comdex. Bill was always very focused and all about business. And, Steve was someone that would have a beer with you and, remember your name. And
he seemed like a nice guy, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. And, at the same time, he could never have built Microsoft.
Right.
He wasn't Bill Gates by any means.
Right.
And, so he was a great person. He was a nice person to work with Bill, to sort of go to meetings when Bill was busy doing something else or couldn't be bothered. And I thought he was he kind of kept things going for a long time. And I think this whole issue of Microsoft's sort of faltering is not surprising. We've seen Microsoft faltering ever since PDAs first happened, because, they're a one-trick pony. They've got an operating system that is massive, and it's never been able to run on batteries. And so they've been having a problem with that ever since. Initially it was PDAs, then it became telephones. And, as PDAs and phones sort of merged. And I just, here they are now. There was a news blurb that was saying that a year from now, when XP stops getting its security updates, it's expected that fully 1/3 of PCs will still be running XP.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because companies don't have money to burn right now. And Microsoft's, unfortunately, their model is one way or the other forcing you to move forward, even if XP works just fine. And so new machines which are purchased will typically have, hopefully Windows 7, maybe Windows 8 at some point, God help you. But so they won't have XP. And so it'll just be, XP will end up dying off by, because the machines that had it will end up dying themselves, and new machines will have a new version of Windows. So anyway, I didn't think Ballmer was ever a genius, but I don't think he was ever expected to be. He was just, he kept things going as well as he could.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this was inevitable. We've been calling, but he's a nice guy. It doesn't mean, he should be running Microsoft. Just, he's a nice guy. It's good. It's an important point to make. It's kind of apparent when you read, his quotes and so forth. He's a fun guy.
I did want to share I got a kick out of an XKCD cartoon, Leo. XKCD.com. This one is 1256. So you can see it at xkcd.com/1256 or 1256/large if you want the big version. And what this again is classic XKCD. These are questions found in Google autocomplete. And it really is wonderful. It's, where you begin to, it is fabulous. You begin to type something, and then Google guesses based on what other people have asked in the past, what you may be in the process of asking. And so it's just a massive screen of sort of fun things. But someone, I don't remember if it was through Twitter or grc.com/feedback, noted that in the very far bottom left corner, you go to the bottom left corner, then you go to the right one column, so it's in the second column, and the third line up is, why is there always a Java update?
It's right in between why don't boys like me and why are there red dots on my thighs?
Why is there always a Java update? Yes, a question for the time.
Good question. Yeah.
Our friend, Mr. Wizard, Bob Bozen at AskMrWizard.com has continued producing his video versions of our prior podcasts that he thinks are core and important. He sent me a note saying, I've just completed new episode 29 on Ethernet insecurity, where you covered ARP cache poisoning. And he continued to say, your narration provided a fine addition to your How the Internet Works and How LANs Work episodes from back in February and March of 2006. So he's continuing to work on those. For listeners of ours who don't already know, Bob produces some videos that use the audio from the podcast along with his animations to sort of further embellish what we're doing at AskMrWizard.com. So just wanted to give a note about that, since he's continued to produce those. And work on SpinRite continues. I don't think I mentioned before that I have confirmed now that one thing that people have been asking for, kind of, the next release will be able to offer, and that is cooler operation. One of the things that laptops have a problem with is getting rid of the heat that they produce. They often have, there just isn't much room for air to move in a laptop just because of the physical size of it. And so many laptops, I know that all of my Lenovo's have a little vent area, and you can feel like hot air being actively blown out of this thing as it's trying to cool off the CPU. I've perfected the technology of completely halting the processor while SpinRite runs. The processor will almost never be running.
What? Well, it's got to run a little bit.
It turns out that a hardware interrupt, can take the processor out of halt, and does. And so we've got the technology now proven for where I'm already at one phase of the work that we're doing, halting the processor for 3.5 seconds in order to make it absolutely quiet to determine some aspects of the system's timing.
That's a great idea.
So that nothing else is going on. Right. Well, it also dramatically lowers the power consumption and thus the heat production, because the whole core, the processor clocks are just stopped. And so what will happen is 6.1 we've also confirmed we'll be able to transfer in 32 megabyte blocks up from much like a 64K buffer to a 32 meg buffer. So we'll be transferring 65,535 sectors at a time. That transfer is initiated, and then the processor is stopped. And it will be sitting there doing nothing, just frozen, while all of that data flows into RAM. And then it'll wake up, check to make sure everything worked, queue up and start the next transfer, and shut down again. So its operational duty cycle will be, I'll end up measuring it because it'll be really fun to know, but fractions of a percentage. And so it'll do that, and we're also going to spin down any drives which are not in use. So SpinRite, the drive SpinRite's running on, many people have machines with 5 or 6 hard drives in them. It's amazing at the machines that we're testing, or sometimes 2 drives, sometimes more. SpinRite will shut anyone's down that it's not working on, again, to further reduce power consumption and to dramatically run the system cooler while it's operating.
Clever.
Yeah. So getting there.
You may have noted the New York Times went down for a few hours this past week. They now know that it was a spear phishing email, not attacking the New York Times, but a company called Melbourne IT, which is an Australian firm that buys addresses, domain names. And it was a domain name reseller, and hackers changed the DNS records once they got the logins from the domain reseller.
Yep.
So it was a really good example of a spear phishing attack sent specifically to staff at Melbourne IT. Boy, that's a...
And it was effective. Yep.
Yep. It wasn't even Melbourne IT. It was a sales partner in the U.S., a partner of Melbourne IT. So very indirect way to get at New York Times. They weren't actually, it looks like, going after the New York Times, but New York Times Plus. And they got quite a few credentials, I gather.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to take a break. We have questions from our audience. Somebody in the chat room said, can I just come in the chat room and ask? No, Steve likes to research his answers. He doesn't like to answer off the cuff. He takes it pretty seriously. So what we do is we have a website, Steve's website, and a form there that you can ask questions. If you want to ask questions now, go to grc.com/feedback, and Steve picks 10 or so questions each every other week, twice a month, answers them. And so, yeah, we don't take ad hoc questions because that's for the Tech Guy show.
I was going to say that I also do keep an eye on my Twitter feed, and so if you mention, if you have something short and you mention SGGRC, so @SGGRC, if you tweet that out, by all means, I'd normally keep current with everything happening in Twitter.
Yeah. Before we get to the questions, a word from one of our great sponsors, ProXPN.com. We've talked about OpenVPN, the idea of encrypting your web traffic so that people, like your internet service provider, can't see what you're doing, so that your traffic can emerge, not necessarily in the U.S., but in a variety of countries to bypass geographic restrictions. Businesses use VPN all the time. OpenVPN is Gibson certified, the best open source solution for this. But, unless you're running an OpenVPN server at home, which is complicated and time-consuming, you might want to look at something like ProXPN. They do all the hard stuff for you to make it easy. If you visit proxpn.com/twit, you can find out what they do. Steve looked at the details. It is, of course, OpenVPN with a 2048-bit encryption key. The tunnel's 512 bits. This is all kind of industry standard. They have servers all over the world, too. Dallas, Seattle, London, Los Angeles, New York City, Singapore, Amsterdam. So you can bypass geographic restrictions. You can protect your banking details from your internet service provider, or if you're at an open Wi-Fi access spot or a hotel or somewhere where others are on your network, protect it from them. More than ever, your online freedom and privacy are under threat. We know that. If you listen to Security Now, this is not news. Governments, ISPs want to control what you can and cannot see. They keep a record of everything you do. Free Wi-Fi at the coffee house, hotel, or airport is also at risk. Try it. It really is easy. It's fast. They have a free version, but the Pro version, we got a special deal for you, and I want to encourage you to try it. The Pro version, which is normally $75 a year or $9.95 a month if you just buy it month to month, you'll get a 20% off deal if you use the offer code SN20, and that's not for the first month or the first year, but for the lifetime of your ProXPN account. So if you get the yearly plan, that'll mean less than $5 a month for this kind of total protection. And, of course, you can cancel within 7 days of your account for full refund, so you don't have to worry about it. Forget CISPA, PIPA, SOPA, 6 strikes in NSA, proxpn.com. Visit proxpn.com/twit and get the offer code SN20. And don't forget, if you're on Android, there's a new ProXPN app for Android in the Play Store. A lot of mobile devices can't do OpenVPN, though, so they do offer PPTP, but as you know, if you listen to the show, it's less secure. You can now do OpenVPN on Android with the ProXPN app, which is awesome. And of course, they have world-class customer support. proxpn.com/twit. Leo.
I will mention, because people are upset about PPTP not being as secure as OpenVPN, but it is way more secure than none. Than nothing. And, when you're at Starbucks or any open Wi-Fi hotspot, I mean, that is probably the #1 highest risk environment there is currently. And so, sure, PPTP encryption tunneling is not infinitely unbreakable, but for someone who's just doing random traffic collection in a Wi-Fi hotspot, sucking in passwords and tokens and so forth, seeing what they can get, you just look like an opaque stream of nonsense, and they're just going to ignore you. So, by all means, that's, use that if that's all you've got. That's like way better than nothing.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
10 questions from our vast listening audience, starting with number 1, Dan in the UK. He's at Dan's Galaxy on Twitter. Is it possible, he asks on Twitter, for the NSA to identify a stream of VPN, well, this is very appropriate, VPN data, and then match it based on variable bit rate to the VPN server outbound? I don't know what he's asking.
Well, so now it's an interesting question, because he's talking about traffic analysis.
Right.
And so if you had a VPN server, is there a way for someone, and he had his example, he's assuming the NSA would have an interest in mapping the unencrypted public traffic back to the encrypted tunneled traffic? And so this is a concern because it's known as traffic analysis. And for example, one of the things that the Tor nodes deliberately do is introduce variable amounts of delay in their forwarding of the traffic when it comes in the node and leaves the node, because they would like to break the association between packet coming in, packet leaving. And so this is the feasibility of doing this is entirely a function of how busy that server is, whether it's a Tor node, for example, or a VPN server, and also just like how closely someone is looking. So, for example, say that you had a server that only one person was using. Well, it's going to be very difficult to try to convince someone that your traffic that was encrypted going in is not related to the traffic coming out, because there will be a burst of incoming traffic and an immediately burst of outgoing traffic. There'll be a one-to-one relationship, and so that makes it very obvious. At the same time, if there were 1,000 people all using the server, then to a much greater degree, you're able to hide amid them. But at the same time, if you remember also that normally people are going to a specific location out on the internet, so there will be an IP address where their public stream out of the VPN is going, and then there's an IP address where the encrypted tunnel coming out the other side of the server is essentially going. And so it's a hard problem to really hide from that kind of analysis, because even if there were 1,000 people, one of the things that is characteristic of our use of the web is it tends to be extremely bursty. That is, you click a link and there's a flurry of activity where your browser requests the web page from the remote site. Then when the page comes in, your browser asks for all the resources, another burst of outgoing, and then typically it's quiet for a long time while you, the human, cogitate over what you've just received and read it, scroll, and then maybe click something, and then another furious burst of activity. So the fact that the traffic is as bursty as it is, really, I mean, it helps anyone who even if you had 1,000 very bursty individual users on a single server, here's a burst, there a burst, and then, bursts come in, bursts come out. It's traffic analysis is a way of de-anonymizing and associating the VPN user with the public user. And this is a problem for which there's not a good solution. That's one of the things that one of the benefits of Tor is that if the reason Tor doesn't use just one node, for example, if you just had a single Tor node, this would be, it would be easy to de-anonymize. It's by having it hop several times and the nodes deliberately introducing a delay specifically to confound somebody trying to do traffic analysis. So great question, Dan.
Yeah, wow. All that in 140 characters. Advait in India, I think. Kerala, India. He's a SpinRite user, and he wonders about Linux versus Windows. Steve, when I browse the net in Windows, I always use NoScript. When I browse using my fully patched, up-to-date Ubuntu, I'm assuming I'm much safer, and I don't worry about NoScript. Am I putting myself at risk by not using NoScript in Ubuntu? Is it true that almost all current web-based malware and threats will simply not execute in Ubuntu? My understanding is Ubuntu is just a GUI shell around Linux. Thanks. Advait, happy SpinRite owner. His understanding of what Ubuntu is mistaken, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing to, I think, appreciate here is that there are, unfortunately, in this day and age, many different ways of getting yourself in trouble. So, for example, if you are using Java, need I say any more? So, so a Java exploit could be tied to the underlying operating system, but doesn't have to be. It could be, leaking your identity, leaking your session keys for things you're doing. It could be it could be causing a web scale leakage of information. For example, logging what you're doing on your banking site, even when you're on Ubuntu Linux. Not because of the Linux as a problem, but because the plugins and add-ons, like another, of course, frequent culprit is Adobe's PDF. By the way, Lee, have you noticed how that sort of has that died down?
We haven't heard a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that sandbox. It went from a like a topic every week to, wow, we haven't heard of any more PDF problems for a long time.
Interesting.
Because they really did. They finally got sandboxing. They took it seriously and got sandboxing working, and that has really slowed these things down. But so there's the potential problem of a web browser exploit. Then it's sort of at the next level is plugins, which the browser is bringing along to enhance your experience, JavaScript, Java, PDF reader, and so forth. And then finally, at the lowest level is the OS itself. And it is absolutely true that at the OS level, we're still seeing vastly more Windows exploitation than we are Mac. I would say Mac is probably number 2, and then Linux is a very distant third, just because the hackers are going where the people are, and the majority of people are still using Windows, and Windows seems to be giving no end of security opportunities for compromise.
Jim Breen in Chicago notes the security implications of Yahoo's recycling its one-year dormant email account. Steve, as you might be aware, Yahoo began recycling email addresses this month. I became aware of it as my employer, a large online e-commerce site, scrambles to figure out how to handle the fact that the email addresses associated with some of our user accounts could soon belong to someone else. This is stupid.
Yes.
Stupid, as Yahoo starts recycling the accounts. So if you had, Leo at yahoo.com, and didn't use it for, what is it, a few years? What is it?
No, it's 6 months, I think. Yeah.
That they might give Leo at Yahoo somebody else who doesn't want it, trust me. There are two big problems caused by Yahoo's decision to recycle email addresses which have been dormant for a year, I guess.
Well, 1 year.
The first, which seems to be getting the most attention based on Google searches, is that email senders with these Yahoo addresses in their mailing list risk sending email to people who didn't sign up for the list. Who knows what kind of stuff? Password resets.
Yep.
And having these people mark the email as spam, which then hurts the sender's email reputation with ISPs. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
This risk can be mitigated by removing the email address from the mailing list if Yahoo has been returning a hard bounce error for previous sends to those email addresses. But will they hard bounce if they reassign it? No.
Nope.
The second problem is relevant to a secure. I wonder if they're going to do, after a year, we hard bounce for 6 weeks and then assign it. Maybe they'll do that.
Actually, what I read was that they were going to hard bounce for a month and then reassign it.
Okay, that would be better than nothing.
Yeah.
Second problem is relevant to a security audience. It's harder to solve. If the original owner of the Yahoo email address associated it with an account on another site, then the new owner of the new email address will be able to take control of that account, of course, using the standard password reset functionality. Since most websites base proof of ownership of an online identity on ownership of an email address, true, Yahoo's decision to recycle email addresses jeopardizes the accounts of those email addresses' former owners on sites across the internet. This seems like something Security Now's audience should know about. Thanks for the great show. Wow, I didn't know about it. That's terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
It's caused. Even our old friend Matt Honan has weighed in, saying, "No, no, 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 do not do this."
Horrible. Marissa Meyer ought to know better.
And it actually, she's been quoted as being the motivation behind this.
Of course.
Yep, saying that, oh well, we're gonna spiff up Yahoo and give it a facelift, and I mean, it's been around forever, and what they're looking at is at all these email addresses that no one can use anymore that are, quote, good email addresses, unquote, not, Barney Smith 327-265-327-4897, but, just Barney Smith.
Hey, you didn't get an email address earlier. You missed the lottery. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I mean,
You know
it would make so much more sense to do yahoo2.com, or make a small change to the domain name or something, rather than take this huge huge bulk of retired email addresses and make them available again. They're still getting email into them, which are bouncing. They're going to forever. But more importantly, and there was some commentary that I appreciated, is that they decide that the account is dormant after some length of time. If you're not logging in, even if you're getting email, if you're not logging in to receive it, they say, oh, it's dormant. And so that's their reassignment basis. Well, the problem is people often use a dormant account as their email security. We've talked about have a separate account for your password recovery. Don't use your normal high traffic account for that. Have password recovery go somewhere else so that it's extra secure. And so now they're saying, oh, well, we're going to, if it's been dormant for a long time, we're going to free it up so people can get it. And the point being made here is it is email, as we all know. That's the way you authenticate. Yeah. That's the only thing we have for proving who you are.
Yeah.
And so they're going to say, no, we're going to let that happen.
Baffling.
Bad idea.
Baffling. I guess one thing they could do that would be, more sensible is to make, a new TLD, yahoo.me or yahoomail.com or something like that.
Or I said yahoo2.com or something.
And then you've got the whole set again, fresh.
Yep.
And the other thing, this is for anybody listening, I think our audience would know this, but this is the very strong argument for buying a domain name of your very own and using it for your email address. So you have a permanent address. And then if something like this happens, you don't have to worry about it. You just move it to some other service. Just own your own damn email address. It seems like nowadays that should be the real answer to this. Don't use somebody else's. Pat Cho in Sacramento wonders whether files can be securely deleted. Oh, this is a good one we get once in a while. You're the guy to answer. From flash drives. Steve, is it possible to securely delete files from flash drives with the AxCrypt utility you recommended from a previous podcast or any other utility? From what I've read, flash drives do writes differently for wear leveling, and so it may not be possible to overwrite a file. Is this a cause for concern, Pat Cho?
So, yes. It's sort of related to hard drives, but even worse. Hard drives will remove a sector from use when it becomes unsafe to store data there because of a defect in the in the magnetic storage surface. So hard drives have a pool of spares, and they will spare out, as it's called, spare out a sector and replace it with sort of a fresh, good one only when there's a problem. Flash drives work differently. As we've discussed, the actual technology of writing to a flash drive involves fatiguing the material of the drive. You use a high voltage to break through the insulation and sort of squirt electrons onto a little isolated pad where they're stranded. And that creates an electrostatic charge, which can then be passively sensed. So you read that there's that little charge there. But the act of writing a 1 or writing a 0 squirts or drains electrons through this insulation, which over time fatigues the insulation. The insulativeness breaks down. So in order to solve that problem, because what our operating systems tend to heavily use certain areas of the directory, the actual directory structure, the metadata, which contains file names and the directory tree. Many files tend to be written much more often than others. So that would create hotspots where the regions of the flash drive containing those files would fatigue much more quickly than areas that weren't ever being used. So flash drive controllers deliberately do this wear leveling, as it's called, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They level the wear so that there isn't undue wear occurring in one location, and it's ongoing all the time. So whereas for a hard drive, it's only if there's a problem, it is fundamental to the way flash drives write, is they have logic that is constantly remapping the surface so that the entire region of the flash drive is overall being written about the same amount. What that means is prior versions of a file may exist on flash drives, and the work that the group down in San Diego has done on recovering from wear-level drives, like essentially circumventing the controller to say, no, I don't want that sector. I want to look at the raw storage region. They've done that, and they have verified that, that this wear leveling means that all kinds of prior instances of data on the drive is there and is definitely available. So what all of this means is, if you're concerned about security, you should never, ever, not once, write unencrypted data to a flash drive.
Wow.
The first thing you need to do is, for example, install TrueCrypt. TrueCrypt will do a beautiful job of encrypting the drive so that everything you write goes through TrueCrypt on the way to being stored, and then you absolutely don't have a problem. Or use AxeCrypt, which is a nice little freestanding utility, or even WinZip. WinZip is now cross-platform. I was looking at it the other day. It uses very strong encryption, and so you use a good cryptographic key, and then use AxeCrypt or WinZip or some enciphering tool so that what you store on the flash drive is always encrypted. Otherwise, to a much greater degree than for hard drives, if somebody really wanted to get at your data, they could.
You'd have to physically destroy the SSD. You'd have to smash it and smash the chips. You got to
crack it open and get to it. But it turns out it's entirely possible to do that. The guys in San Diego, there's a group of researchers who have been experimenting with this.
Now, if after the fact, I have an SSD, external USB SSD. If I, after the fact, apply full disk encryption, even though I've been writing to it unencrypted for a while, they'd have to have the key to the full disk encryption to get down to the stuff, right?
I
turned on Apple's file vault encryption, which is whole disk encryption.
Right, or TrueCrypt. If you add TrueCrypt later, then the problem is you'd have to. I mean, over time, it would of using it that way, it would tend to replace the less recently written regions with more recently written regions,
which would be encrypted at that point.
Which would then be encrypted, exactly. Right. So over time, the previously unencrypted data would kind of get pushed out of use by the wear leveling, which is what created the problem in the first place.
So it sounds like if you buy a new computer, and almost all laptops and many desktops come with SSDs, the first thing you should do is turn on full disk encryption.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're just really
before you do anything else,
because it's going to be too late if you do anything else.
Exactly.
And is it, you know, Windows comes with BitLocker and Apple comes with File Vault. These are, you know, as we've spoken about before, I don't really trust any non-open source utility, but that would be the easiest way to do it because you don't have to.
I just like TrueCrypt because it's portable.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's been very well engineered.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
But you're right. But there are native solutions.
Yeah, there's
BitLocker
operating system based.
Yep.
Now, is there any way after the fact now to wipe the drive? No.
No, there isn't. No, this is
so too late.
This is done below the level of the API. There are in the latest specs the so-called ATA and ATAPI. The AT attachment spec, this is where I've been living for the last couple of months. This is where SpinRite lives. There are commands, for example, a secure wipe, but it's not exactly clear to me yet how that functions. And the other thing I want to look at, and I will be, is the idea of the password on the drive, whether using the drive's own password, what level of security and where that can be bypassed. But bottom line is, I would, you know, if it's a black box, it's a black box. It's very much like the cloud, you know, the internet. We say pre-internet encryption because we don't know what that cloud is going to do. Similarly, we don't know what that drive is going to do. Much better not to be concerned about it. You know, TNO applies to your drive too. Encrypt it before it gets written on the drive.
Wow. And if you haven't, which most of us haven't, I mean, you're... I have tons. All my computers have SSDs now. Too late.
Yep. The good news is SpinRite will recover them when they have a problem. But it is the case that you would want to add encryption immediately.
Turn it on right now and just keep using it.
Right now,
yeah. And
just keep using it. And as it gets used, the wear leveling that caused the problem in the first place will also cause the solution.
Right.
Because it'll still be wear leveling, but you'll be leveling. It'll be pushing the unencrypted stuff out into history, overwritten by encrypted data.
Wow. Mike in Philadelphia has some PGP worries. Thanks for the PGP episode, Steve. That was last week's, by the way. I had already downloaded Mailvelope and generated keys a few weeks prior, so I was happy for some background. Here's my worry, though. Where do those PGP keys come from? Are they generated by my browser? Or are they auto-generated by some key server? My worry is that these are generated by a key server, and I could choose to accept them or generate a new pair. My concern, of course, is snooping while we can just skip this because they're not.
Right.
He's got all sorts of concerns.
But yes, so I wanted to make sure that nobody else was concerned. The whole concept of PGP or even SSL keys that servers use is the private key, you know, the keys to the kingdom, absolutely never leave your control.
And they're created by the PGP program you're using, in his case, Mailvelope.
Right.
Locally. They're not created by a key server anywhere or anything like that.
Correct. So Mike's concern was that there seemed to be a server involved, and because this was a web-based solution, he was uncomfortable with, well, I'm seeing things appear in the browser. Did the browser make that? Or did it get it from a server? Because, which is a reasonable question, because everything we see on a web page comes from a server somewhere. But in this specific case, it is cryptographic code running in the browser that on the fly generates the key, and it never your private key never leaves your control. And that's fundamental to the whole public-private key technology, which is one of the things that makes it really so fundamentally cool.
and it's generated locally by your local software. That's why we say use open source software so that you make sure that there's no code in the software that generates the key, a good secure key, and then emails it off to the NSA or something like that.
Exactly.
Open source software, you can, you or somebody can validate that it's fine. So that's, that's a nice thing about PGP. It is open source. I'm sure Mailvelope is open source, so you can see what's going on. Generate secure keys. And, again, I've said this before, but even if you happen to lose control of your private key, there still needs to be a passphrase to use it, to unencrypt it. Right. So this is why you should not use, what was that Terminator 2 passphrase? You should use a good, and passphrase might really be the wrong thing to say because it implies an English language sentence.
Does, yes.
And we really shouldn't be using that. We should be using long, random strings of letters.
Passcode.
Passcode would be much better. Or even word isn't a good.
No.
Yeah, passcode. Random string of upper and lowercase letters, punctuation, and numbers.
grc.com/passwords.
He'll generate one for you of any arbitrary length.
There. Yep.
And then do like Walter White does. Memorize. It's good for your brain. Buy a lotto ticket. Dan Uff in Allen. Actually, a lotto ticket's bad because it's all numeric. You need some other stuff in there.
Yeah.
That's not enough. That's not enough entropy, kids. Hey, before we get to Dan Uff, who wonders about using Security Now on his internet radio station, I want to mention Lookout Mobile Security. If you're an Android user, you ought to know about Lookout. I use it, and I tell everybody about it, and I recommend you install it. It's nice. It's free, and it has some nice features besides looking for cyber threats. 40 million people now use Lookout. I highly recommend this. If you care about your phone or your tablet and the information on it, Lookout's protection is a must-have. They have the world's largest mobile threat data set, so that's how it works. And so it scans every new app for malware that you put on your system. Very handy for that. They've, in fact, stopped over 10 million mobile threats to date using their dynamic threat analysis and modeling system to map and identify threats in real time. Every time I download a new app from any source, Lookout scans it and then says thumbs up, or I haven't yet seen a thumbs down, but that could happen. This continuous feedback loop that is constantly going between users and researchers allows Lookout to proactively protect personal and business devices for threats before they become an issue. The security is pushed out to you automatically all the time. You don't have to worry about it. Lookout for Android. Oh, I didn't know it. They have it for iOS now. That's great. And the Kindle Fire. Best protection, automatic protection for malware, adware, spyware. By the way, I should mention they have a really good Find My Device solution that does some things that are super smart. Like, for instance, it saves the last time the device was seen. So even if the bad guy turns the device off or goes into a parking garage, it knows the last place the device was seen. With Signal Flare, even if your battery gets low, so you're much more likely to find that phone if it runs out of juice or is actively turned off by a bad guy. There's data backup and restore too. Easy device management. Most of these features are free. Some of them are premium. Try the free security solution right now. Lookout.com/securitynow. And I'm thrilled to hear they have for iOS. I do not set up the first thing I do on an Android phone before I even download the other apps is install Lookout. Lookout.com/securitynow. Steve Gibson, security guru. Leo Laporte. A few more questions for you, Steve. Starting with this one from a radio station, Dan Uff in Allentown, PA. He writes, I'm the owner of a small internet radio station, WDMU Internet Radio. I'm in the process of trying to fill my radio time with quality content. I'd like to consider having your show as part of my station's lineup. I think the show would be a great fit and help educate my listeners about internet security at the same time. I see the show is made once a week. That's what I'm looking for. I'm also a big fan of Leo's and blah, blah, blah. And would be honored to have him played on my small station. Thank you for considering this request. If you have questions, please feel free to contact me directly. Thank you.
So what do you think?
It's okay by me. Here's the deal.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, here's the deal. And you should contact Lisa at twit.tv to get formal approval, okay? Lisa, L-I-S-A, is our CEO at twit.tv. But here's how it works. If you look at our license, it's at the bottom of every web page at twit.tv. We are Creative Commons licensed. You can read the details of that license. We do ask that you adhere to our license, which has 3 requirements. It's okay to be, to play it freely for non-commercial purposes as long as you give full attribution. That's simple. Twit TV. In fact, you don't even have to do anything because unless you cut it off, it's in the beginning of every show. There.
Yes.
And the third thing is that it's a share alike license, which means if you make a mashup, which you are even allowed to do, that you have the same license on the mashup. Now, I would ask personally that you leave our ads in because that's how we monetize. But our license does not require. I shouldn't even mention that, but does not require you to do that. If you're going to put it on a commercial radio station, if you have your own ads on there, then you need to get our permission. And Lisa at twit.tv is the email address. But people do this all the time. We're rebroadcast in a lot of different ways. And
I don't think we'd ever talked about it, so I just wanted to.
Yeah, I love it. And you may add your own license. I don't know, Steve. But that's the license on all of our
Creative
content.
Commons.
Yep, CC, non-commercial attribution share alike. And you can click the link at the bottom of every web page at twit.tv if you want to see the specific verbiage. As long as you adhere to the license, you don't even have to ask our permission. If you want to use it in a commercial environment, which this might be, then we're absolutely lenient. But do email us, Lisa at twit.tv. What we don't want to do is have people use it to make money, cut our ads out, put their ads in, things like that. That's just rude. Be polite.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John in Sacramento has an interesting thought experiment about PGP. He's been listening since episode 1, which bet as long as you can, 9 years. He was listening to our last episode. He's had the thought, why not put PGP in the email server instead of the client? As I understand it, we have SSL encryption between the user's email client and the server, whether it's using IMAP, POP, webmail, SSL, and it works with mobile as well. With PGP on the server, the user connects securely to their email server in whatever way is the most convenient to them, creates an email, and then as part of pressing the send button, once the server gets it, the server will encrypt it with PGP before sending it out to the recipient's server. Once there, by the way, there's the rub, the recipient's email server would handle the decryption when the recipient connects, again, securely in whatever way is most convenient for them and download the decrypted message. All that's needed is a client capable of connecting to the server securely, which is much easier than trying to deal with plugins, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think, Steve Areno?
Well, the problem is there are several problems. One is that the moment you step back from and the right term is end-to-end encryption. That's one thing we're going to be hearing. It's a term we haven't really spent that much time focusing on, but it's been implied in many of the things we're talking about. SSL is end-to-end encryption. You encrypt it where you are, it's decrypted where it's going, and everywhere in between, it's a pseudo-random stream of noise that has no meaning to anyone. So that's the only way to be secure. As soon as you step that encryption back, even one stage from the end user, you start having problems. And so, for example, as you alluded to, even when you were reading this, Leo, John is right in that if we have an encrypted link to our server, then our email is safe. And if the server then encrypts it and it's encrypted in flight to the other server, it's safe. But notice that he said once there, the recipient's email server would handle the decryption when the recipient connects. So it's the weak link at the server where now we have vulnerability. Whereas if you do leave it encrypted all the way to the endpoint, you're not having that vulnerability. But there are more problems. For example, one of the beauties of the way PGP works, and Leo, you've alluded to this, is when if you've got PGP locally and you've got a bunch of email addresses associated with the recipient's PGP keys, your client knows when to encrypt and when not to. It knows whose keys it's able to encrypt your message for, or if your client sees that you don't have a PGP key, it just sends it in the clear. So you lose that level of control and feedback the moment you move encryption away from the client, away from the endpoint, which is really where it needs to be. What you want is it's encrypted before it leaves the device. It's not decrypted until it arrives at the recipient. Anything else, I mean, John's right that you would have secure links every step of the way, but it does create a problem where, for example, the NSA could say to whoever it is running either your server or the destination server, we want to take a look at that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are solutions that do this. Hushmail does this, but you're trusting Hushmail.
Yep.
And so it doesn't. So the problem with PGP is that you have to create a key and share the key, and people find that complicated. You can't send an encrypted email to somebody who's not shared his key with you, or for whom you cannot find a key online, and so that's the pain in the butt.
Well, okay. In fact, you are. This is the perfect segue into the next question, Leo. I think you. Go ahead.
Here we go. Question 8. Tim in Kansas, who really likes the idea of secure email, says, "I just thought I'd ask if you could go over the challenges of using PGP with Outlook. There are free options. GPG for Win only supports older versions of Outlook." And those on Exchange servers. As far as I know, only commercial options exist for Exchange, and I'm not certain if the flexibility is on par, say, with Thunderbird or GPG or Enigmail. Thank you so much for covering this topic. I hope to see greater adoption of it, as realistically, I've only been able to email myself and Leo. Thanks for replying to my test, Leo. No one else I know uses it, nor can they yet be convinced. Best, Tim. Yeah, I have now almost 200 keys in my keychain.
Yeah, and this, of course, is the problem. I mean, famously, this delayed Snowden's
you couldn't get
release.
Glenn Greenwald to do it.
Exactly. Glenn refused. He said, "Oh, I'm busy.
I don't have time.
Yeah, I don't have time."
Now, I should say, once you exchange keys or you figure it, once you have that going on, it's really easy. I just push a button. And enter my passphrase in some cases, like on the Mac, the passphrase stored in the secure Mac keychain. I don't even have to do that. Once I'm logged in, I'm sending anytime I email these people, I can send them completely secure email except for the metadata.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's going to be fun as an observer to sort of watch and see where this goes. My sense is people don't care that much. They're like me. Right. It's like, well, I'm just sending.
Just understand your email's a postcard. If you don't care, doesn't matter. This is, and I agree. And this is more an exercise. My first PGP key I created in 1997.
Because you could.
Because I could. I've encouraged people to do it, and I have always published my public key on my website, leoville.com. I had a hysterical exchange with somebody who said, "I looked everywhere. It's not on your website." Well, it is. It's on leoville.com. Well, no, but when I Google you, the first result is Tech Guy Labs. Why isn't it there? Well, it's not there. It's on my personal website, leoville.com. But it should be on all your websites. No, it's on leoville.com or on the key server.
It's where it is.
It's not where it isn't. Yeah. Sorry, dude. Yeah, I should also put it in your pocket, but it's not. Nevertheless, more than 200 people have, and I apologize, I have actually been, unfortunately, swamped by people who want to exchange keys and test their setup.
Because you're the only one they know.
Me and Tim.
Yeah, let's get, okay, Tim, maybe we can give out your email, and then you'll be part of a crowd of people.
Well, what I do is I sign every email that goes out. And people see this PGP block. Maybe they start to get them. I don't know. I've done it for years, and it's not. You're right. Nobody wants to do it.
No.
John O. Denton, Tejas wonders about cookieless cookie tracking. Steve, have you heard about this? Of course you have, Steve. About this cookieless track technology that cannot be blocked. Doesn't rely on cookies, JavaScript, HTML5, local storage, session storage, global storage, Flash, Java, or other plugins, nor on your IP address, your user agent string, or any methods employed by Panopticlick. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, this was also in the news. I'm not sure why it sort of sputtered up to the top. We've talked about it briefly. Right. It involves e-tags. one of the things, which is essentially, it's been referred to as a cache cookie. The idea being, and it's in use by websites right now, when a website provides you with an asset, like the icon for the the little fave icon for the URL, or any of the embellishments that is standard on the site. As we know, browsers cache that on the theory that it's much better to just save a bunch of this stuff locally. I mean, look how big our hard drives are. We can afford to save it locally than going through the round trip of asking the remote server to send it to us again. So it saves on the server resources. It saves on time. It makes the whole experience much better. What happens is, though, browsers may want to verify that there's been no change. So the server, when it provides an asset like an icon, for example, for the page, it will add a header, so-called metadata, to the resource called an e-tag, which is meant to be an opaque token, which is to say it's the value is what's important, not what the value means. That is, the value means something to the server. It might be a hash. It might be a CRC. It might be a checksum. It might just be an incrementing value that changes when the object changes. But that's the key, because the browser sends back when the page it's loaded says, I need to display this icon. The browser sends back the same e-tag that it received saying, I have this icon that you provided me with this e-tag. If the e-tag is different now, send it to me. Well, that's tracking. That's a way for the browser. I mean, it's exactly like a cookie. Well, it's not exactly like a cookie. It's cookie-esque highly, because basically it's tracking your cache. It's the way for the remote site to be issuing these tokens to all the things in your browser that the browser is going to cache, and the browser sends them back to make sure they haven't changed, which identifies you. Uniquely identifies you if the e-tags are unique. So that's the key. If the e-tag was the same for every icon that it sent to everyone, then when they came back, the server wouldn't know who you were. But the e-tag, again, is an opaque token. So if it's something about the object plus something about you, then when it comes back, it essentially contains uniquely identifying information, so that your copy in the cache is different from somebody else's copy in their cache, even though they went to the same site. So cookieless tracking via e-tags, via the cache in your browser, is something. It's in one more way that we're being de-anonymized or at least tracked as we move around the internet.
Robert Osorio in Lady Lake, Florida, wonders about the trusted, what is it, TPM, Trusted Program
Platform
Module. And the German government's concerns. We've been talking about this for a while. The article in the German government about the German government says that the German government thinks Windows 8 is a Trojan horse for the NSA and recommends people not use it. A year ago, I would have dismissed this as tinfoil nonsense, he goes on to write, but now one has to at least admit it's possible. After going to the Techno Security Conference for a couple of years, I know that enterprise customers have to vet hardware for Trojans embedded in firmware. I'm not sure about TPM 2.0 being forced upon you in Windows 8, though. Also, since it's a device, and any device can be disabled by some kind of hack, I would think you could bypass it. If Windows doesn't have a driver for it, or if the driver is disabled, I don't see how it could be forced on you. As I understand it, what TPM does right now is just provide a hardware crypto engine and a very good random number generator. Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8 will use it if it's available, but it is not required. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, so we've done an episode in the past on the Trusted Platform Module. And it is, as Robert suggests, it is basically a crypto engine. It's a physical chip by requirement, essentially soldered onto the motherboard that creates an identity for the machine and also a vault for secrets, for cryptographic secrets. And the way the thing is designed is it is possible for you to ask it to validate things, but it is not possible. There's no API that will cause it to give out your secrets. So as I understand it, Leo, and I haven't not researched this because I've been busy with SpinRite, but as I understand it, all of this nonsense seems to me that the German government is complaining about is this notion of sort of a loss of sovereignty to like their own independent control of a Windows 8 based system, which has secure boot technology and is locked to the trusted platform module, you know, on the desktop or the laptop's board.
Yeah, I don't, you know, if you think about it, the logic of it is strained. I mean, if you're using anybody's closed source code, it's difficult to know what it's doing.
Yeah, virtually impossible.
Yeah. And so the TPM module or not, I guess what they're saying is don't assume the TPM gives you some sort of security from Microsoft.
Well, one of the things that I've got on my short list of topics is the Windows 8 secure boot technology. Yeah. I want to look at it closely.
By the way, can be disabled.
Yes, yes, and in fact has to be in order to run SpinRite. A lot of the testers who've been playing with the testing code are booting their Windows 8 machines, and turning secure boot off is one of the things that people will need to do in order to. Essentially, the idea is that how do you ever know that a Trojan or a rootkit didn't get into the system before Windows began? That's the Achilles heel of ever being able to trust Windows once it's running. Was there a shim? Was there any opportunity for running something untrusted? And so it's really been carefully thought out, this notion of we're going to start from something we absolutely know, and every single step forward we're going to validate that we're only running. We're still in a trusted enclosure, essentially. And so that's, I mean, it turns out it's a hard problem to solve, and fascinating from an academic standpoint.
And whoever wrote this article didn't really understand what's going on. I mean, whatever German government official said this. If you're using it, you know, it's the same reason we don't use Chinese operating systems here in the U.S. It's just if somebody writes the operating system and it's got any closed source code at all,
they have no idea what it's going to be doing.
No idea what it's doing.
None.
TPM or not.
Yep.
And TPM does not secure you from the operating system by any means. That's not the point of it. Steve, we'll come to the end of 10 fine questions from our lovely listening audience. That means we're at the end of the show. I thank you. Encourage everybody to follow Steve on the Twitter. He's at SGGRC. He's also at grc.com on the web. If you go there, you can get SpinRite, world's best hard drive maintenance utility, a must-have. But you can also get lots of other stuff, lots of freebies. Steve really labors away to help you be safe, secure, and sound. The passwords are great, all sorts of stuff. grc.com. If you do have a question, that's the place to go to post your questions for future episodes. grc.com/feedback.
That's where these came from.
Every one of them.
Yep. Well, except for the one
Twitter.
from Twitter.
One Twitter. Yep.
Exactly.
And you can also, while you're there, you might want to get the 16 kilobit version if you're bandwidth impaired, or even smaller, the text version. We have full transcriptions at grc.com. The high-quality audio and video versions are at twit.tv/SN for security now. And wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, subscribe to your favorite version or several. That way you're sure never to miss a week. Steve, I thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, my friend, and we'll talk to you next week.